Families can be driven apart for all manner of reasons.
I had no information at all about where my mum went.
And when you do lose touch with your loved ones,
you don't know who you are, where have you come from.
Finding them can take a lifetime.
I might have a brother that's still living here.
Especially when they could be anywhere, at home or abroad. And that's where the Family Finders come in. From international organisations...
Hi, it's the Salvation Army Family Tracing Service.
...to genealogy detective agencies.
For someone to say that it's changed their life, it makes coming to work, you know, really, really special.
And dedicated one-man bands.
It's a matter of how much effort you really want to put into it, how badly you want to solve the problem.
They hunt through history to bring families back together again.
Finding new family is wonderful.
In this series, we follow the work of the Family Finders.
Suddenly you get that one spark of breakthrough, and there they are.
Learning the tricks they use to track missing relatives through time.
I didn't think I'd ever find sisters, but I have.
And meeting the people whose lives they change along the way.
I've been waiting to meet John my whole life.
Since we've met, I feel part of a family again.
You just completed my life for me.
When it comes to tracking down lost family members, you don't always have to pay for a professional service or seek outside help. In the age of the internet, anyone can become a family detective. Today we follow one man's mission to find out about his grandfather, which uncovered a family lost across the generations.
Well, that's really quite shocking, actually, in a pleasant kind of way. It's as if it's meant to be.
And Lynn, who spent years trying to track down her long-lost brother.
A million things went through in my head what I thought I would say to him, and I practised it and practised it and practised it, and then I rang the number, and just before I put the last digit in, I put the phone down, and if I did that once, I must have done it 20 times.
53-year-old Simon Wrigley was born and brought up on the Isle of Wight.
It was a great place to grow up. My father was the harbour master, so we were a lot of the time on boats, and I grew up on boats, and I loved the sea.
But at the age of 21, Simon decided to leave the island and broaden his horizons.
And by chance, I ended up in Israel, literally by chance, as a volunteer on the kibbutz. I was working in the bananas and with the oranges, and we were a group of young people. We were having a wonderful time, and been there ever since.
Even though he's been living in Israel for over 30 years, Simon has never forgotten his roots.
England is my home, especially the Isle of Wight, and that's where I come from. When you live away from your family, you realise how important they are.
But it wasn't until he returned to the Isle of Wight briefly after his grandmother died that Simon began a fascination with his family history.
When grandparents die, when they pass over, the knowledge goes with them. I think that living away from my family and growing older and family members passing away, I became aware of that more. And it's very important to talk to them about the past, to get that knowledge from them, because if not, it goes. I discovered a picture in my parents' house of my grandparents, and this was when they were engaged. It must be around 1923. I can see myself in my grandfather, and I realised that nobody really had any connection with his side of the family. And there was this whole sort of mystery that nobody knew. That's why I wanted to know more about him.
Determined to find out more about his mysterious grandfather Bernard, who had died before he was born, Simon began his search close to home with his mother.
I asked her lots of questions because it was her father, and she's the only one that remembers her father. She was 12 years old when he died. She remembers sitting on his knee and he would sing to her, and he told her stories of the war and that he had a crash in a plane over France.
Simon knew very little else about his grandfather, so determined to discover more, back in Israel, he began to search in earnest on the internet.
One of the first things I discovered online was my grandfather's death certificate. And here's my grandfather's name on the certificate, Bernard Frederick Grounsell. He died at a very early age, at the age of 46, in 1949. He died of lung cancer, to which I didn't know. It stirred an emotion in me, reading this, because what does this come down to? Just a piece of paper saying somebody's died, but this is somebody. This is my family. This is my grandfather, and it's not just a date on a piece of paper. It was a human being.
Simon's search was beginning to bear fruit, and now he'd started to delve into his past. He couldn't stop. Next, he traced his family tree back hundreds of years.
We get back here to 1744. It was like a piece of history in my hands. I was amazed. When I read this, when I look at it, I think, who are these people? What did they do? Where did they come from?
But Simon's focus kept coming back to the mysterious Bernard.
I realised that my grandfather was one of 9 children. There were so many questions that were raised, which sparked my interest.
There was one question that really caught Simon's imagination. If his grandfather had 8 brothers and sisters, could Simon have surviving relatives out there he didn't know about? He decided to investigate further. His first port of call was back on the Isle of Wight.
I thought I'd give it a go by putting an advertisement in the local paper. They have a section here called Islanders Reunited. So I thought I'll send an email here and let's see if anything comes up.
As well as putting an advert in the local paper, Simon engaged the help of the Family History Society on the Isle of Wight. There are 160 of these local societies around the UK. All are listed on the Federation of Family History Society website. The FFHS deal with England, Ireland and Wales. If you live in Scotland, you'll need to contact the Scottish Association of Family History. Local societies are a great starting point for your search and can help with research tips, burial indexes and parish records. Simon had been in touch with the local history society and placed an ad in the local press, but with no idea if his ancestors had any surviving relatives left on the Isle of Wight. All he could do now was wait.
It must have been about 6 months, and I got a bit sort of almost slightly given up, but I didn't have much hope of finding family members from this. But I thought, at least I'll give it a try. You never know.
Was this the end of his journey to find long-lost relations? Or was it just the beginning? "54-year-old Lynn Lewis has been waiting almost 40 years to find out the truth about her long-lost family. Lynn grew up in Buxton in the Peak District with her parents, Maureen and Alan, her 2 sisters and a brother.
I had a wonderful childhood. Everything we wanted, we got. We were a bit spoiled, really. It was always a happy home. Mum and Dad, I think, planted that in us all, that family was important. So I am really close to all of my family.
The first clue for Lynn that all may not be as it seemed came one Christmas when she was hunting for presents.
When I was younger, I looked through Mum's drawer, seeing if she was hiding anything at the side of the bed once, and I found this little black and white photograph of a little baby. And I thought, who's this? But obviously I couldn't ask me Mum because I shouldn't have been rooting through her drawers. Maybe it was a cousin, maybe it was a baby, a friend of Mum and Dad's, or I didn't have any idea and think for one moment it could possibly be a sibling of mine.
It wasn't until years later that Lynn discovered the truth about the baby boy in the photo.
My parents told me I had an older brother when I was around 15. I think they thought at that point I was probably old enough to take on board the information. It was much of a shock to me, so I asked, will I ever see him? What does he look like? And they said, well, we'll never know because we gave up all rights to have him. He was given up for adoption. You know, there's nothing you'll ever be able to do about it. Mum was only 15 at the time when she got pregnant, and she said in them days it wasn't allowed for you to have a baby out of wedlock and so young, so she was sent away to a mother and baby home to have my brother.
In fact, the news of 15-year-old Maureen's pregnancy had a devastating effect on the family.
My mum went home to tell her parents that she was pregnant, and her mum was at the top of the stairs at the time, and she must have shouted up to her, and her mother fell down the stairs and died. That left just my granddad then, and I think it was a shock and a really taboo subject. She probably blamed herself for her mum dying, so she'd got the guilt of all that, and I can't imagine what she must have gone through. Nobody to talk to apart from her sisters.
Maureen was sent away to a mother and baby home for the remainder of her pregnancy. She cared for her new baby there for the first 6 weeks of his life, while suitable adoptive parents were found for him.
It was a heart-wrenching day for her. She didn't want to give him away. Her and my dad would have loved to have just kept the baby and got married and carried on with a lovely family life. And that's what she craved for, both of them, mum and dad. That's what they wanted to do, but the decision was taken completely out of her hands.
Even though Maureen was forbidden to see the baby's father, Alan, the couple continued their relationship in secret, until finally, 3 years later, they were married. Shortly afterwards, Lynn was born, and 3 more siblings were to follow.
Mum and Dad had always wanted another boy. And then 10 years after my youngest sister was born, my mum got pregnant again, and they finally got the little boy that they'd always wanted.
It was the couple's last child together. Just 4 years after his youngest son was born, Lynn's father, Alan, was diagnosed with leukemia.
The illness was too far gone for them to actually treat it, and his lifespan didn't last more than 6 to 8 months. And before we turned round, he'd gone, and he was only 39. It was a very, very stressful and upsetting time for the whole family.
Despite his illness, Lynn's dad walked her down the aisle on her wedding day in 1981. He died just a few days later. Lynn made it her mission to reunite the remaining family.
So I decided after my dad had died that I would see whether I could find my brother. I had thought about him since they'd told me when I was 15, but now it became more important to me to try and find him. So I gathered the information from Mum as much as I could, and I was determined that one day I'd meet this brother of mine.
But Lynn's search immediately hit a brick wall that would leave her frustrated for the next 25 years.
Because Mum had given him up for adoption, I didn't have any rights to look for him. He could look for us, but we couldn't look for him. Every programme that I watched on the TV that had anything to do with adoptions, I'd be scanning the TV looking for somebody that looked like my dad. I even wrote to Cilla Black, surprise, surprise. But I got a letter back saying sadly they couldn't help me, and everywhere I went it was a closed door. And it wasn't until I watched a programme on the television in 2005 that said, please dial this number if you've been affected by this programme. I dialed the number, I explained what had happened, and I was told then that the law had changed a couple of years ago and you now had a right to look for your siblings.
In 2005, there was a change in the law which, for the first time, allowed people to contact birth relatives who'd been put up for adoption. This initial contact has to take place through an intermediary, such as an adoption agency or local authority. It was because of this law change that Lynn could finally try and find her long-lost brother with the help of an adoption agency.
I gave him as much information as I possibly could, and I was told then the procedure would be that if they found somebody that was my brother, they would then write a letter to him explaining that they had somebody that wanted to get in contact with him.
From there, Lynn's long 25-year search for her brother began to move very quickly.
I got a phone call from the agency saying they'd narrowed it down to one person who they felt sure was my brother, and could I write a letter and send photographs that they would pass on to him. So I was so excited. The emotions, the love, the scared, the frightened, what's he going to look like? You know, he could be somebody famous for all I knew. He could be anything. And I couldn't imagine what was going to become of this, but it was just so exciting to think that I'd find, after 25 years, the door was opening and maybe he would be at the other side of it.
But there was still one big question that remained unanswered. Would her long-lost brother want to get back in touch with his birth family?
I wrote this long letter and left it with the adoption agency and waited. So it all hung on whether he actually read the letter and wanted to get in touch with me.
All Lynn could do now was wait. In Israel, Simon Wrigley was also playing a waiting game. What began as a desire to discover more about his grandfather had become a mission to find long-lost relations on the Isle of Wight. Simon had appealed online for any news of his grandfather's 8 brothers and sisters, but there his search seemed to have hit a dead end.
From the time that I placed the advert, more or less 6 months passed, and I hadn't heard anything. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I saw an email. It was a very emotional moment to think that somebody's read the email and who is a family member, and I was very curious to see who this person was or how they're connected.
I was quite excited about it because at the time I was working on the family tree myself, but only the bare skeleton of it. And he started telling me a bit of the information that he'd got together, which I was then able to piece together with the information I already had.
And then I realised that her father must be my mother's first cousin.
Hayley had seen Simon's ad. They worked out that their grandfathers were brothers, making Hayley and Simon second cousins.
It was very exciting when I first read the email because I felt there was a reconnection with the Grounsell family. It was the next step for me. It was another piece in the jigsaw.
I'd never met my granddad. He died the year I was born, and the Grounsell family's always been quite a mystery to me, a bit of an enigma. But it turns out it's actually quite a large extended family on the island that I never even knew about.
And that wasn't all. Someone else saw Simon's ad. Jane. Her father, Frank, was another of the Grounsell brothers.
It was so absolutely amazing because Simon wrote back to me and wanted to know what stories I knew, and I filled him in with quite a lot because my father was a great storyteller. I knew loads of stories going right back to when they were little boys. I've got to know Hayley, and we just clicked. We got on like a house on fire.
Thanks to Simon's determined detective work, the 3 cousins were able to share stories and anecdotes, helping to fill in some of the gaps in their family history.
I don't know about the girls of the family, but out of the 9 siblings, I think the 5 boys used to get up to all sorts of mischief by the sound of it.
I know my father said if they ever came home drunk, they would have to spend the night in the local police station. My grandfather wouldn't entertain anybody coming in drunk.
I found out things about my granddad I never knew. I never knew he was in a rodeo. So that was like, wow.
This clipping came out of our local paper on the island, and then I came across my grandfather's name in this. My grandfather and his brothers were part of a horse riding act. I believe he's the one on the top. They formed a pyramid. So here he is standing on a horse with his brothers. There's 4 of his brothers here.
They used to lead the carnivals, Newport Carnival, well, a lot of the island carnivals, they used to lead the procession.
As more of Simon's grandfather's relatives came to light, the cousins decided to celebrate their newfound family by arranging a reunion in 2004. Simon flew back from Israel to meet them all for the first time.
I was slightly nervous, I think, really. I mean, how will they like me, or who knows? I believe we had about 20 members of the family come up, and the question was, without being rude, now, who are you? How are you related? And I got the family tree out, and there was a lot of missing gaps that I could fill in.
For Simon, it was the successful culmination of years of research, the fruits of which he now committed to paper.
Although I had all this information, it was all online, I had documents, I had things here and there, so I decided to put a small book together for them. I wrote a profile on each member of the family. Everyone has a story, every relative has a story attached. And I continuously work on this, and I continuously update this all the time, so it's an ongoing project, basically. I also believe it's a way of keeping their memory alive. They might have passed away, but it's important to keep their memory, to know who they were, what they were, how you related, because it's part of you. It's important. It's important to know these things.
So it's all kind of like, wow.
Gained a complete like new family.
Yeah.
That were always there.
With all these stories to go with it, that just amazing. Got Simon to thank for that, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm getting emotional, sorry.
Oh.
After making contact with relatives he never knew he had, now Simon is embarking on the next chapter of his ongoing journey to find out more about the Groundsell family. He's making the 4,000-mile trip from Israel to the Isle of Wight, along with his partner, Yuval. Tomorrow he'll be reunited with his new relations again and hopes to fill in even more of the blanks in his family history.
I'm going home. It's always exciting to be with your family and to come home. I've got some new information for them to share with them, and maybe they have some new information for me, so it's quite exciting to see what they have and also to share what I have.
But this morning, before the reunion, Simon has one very important stop to make: the graveyard where his grandfather Bernard is buried.
It's important to visit my grandfather's grave and for me to keep his memory alive.
To help find exactly where his grandfather is buried, Simon has turned to the internet for help again. Online, there are records of every graveyard in the UK. To find the right plot, Simon and Yuval have downloaded a map.
According to this, it looks like 4 graves in, if this is the path. These are the trees. So it's on a bit and to the left.
But even with a map, finding the right grave in an old graveyard is easier said than done.
I think it was more this way.
But while searching for his grandfather, Simon stumbles on something unexpected.
By chance, I've just discovered my great-grandfather's grave, George Young Groundsell. Died November the 28th, 1915, age 74.
Well, that's really quite shocking, actually, in a pleasant kind of way, to discover their grave by accident. It's as if it's meant to be, just stumbling along here, and there we are. This must be the Groundsell Row, I should imagine. And here we are. We're standing right next to it. Would you believe it? This is the grave. I think all these years have passed, since 1949. But it's important to visit the grave and to remember.
After finding the graves of his grandfather and even his great-grandfather, Simon's heading to meet some of the surviving generations of the Groundsell family.
Hello! Oh, so many people here. Hello!
For a hug.
You look lovely. Hi, Jane. How are you?
Lovely to see you.
Hello. How are you?
Thanks to Simon's work, everyone here has now been reconnected with family members they never knew they had. Now Simon can share the latest edition of his family history book and also his latest discovery, made just a few hours ago.
It took us a while to find the grave. We were sort of hunting amongst, because it all looks the same. And then while we were looking, we came across our, let me get this right, great-great-grandparents' grave.
Oh, wow.
By chance, George Young Groundsell and his wife, Sarah. So that was interesting, yeah.
And cousin Jane has been carrying out some research of her own.
I brought this along for you to see, Simon, because I know there's some of the pictures you wanted. I've been up in the attic.
Have you?
Looking
What have you discovered in your attic?
That's an early picture of my father there.
And who's this little cute one?
I was about 3 months old.
All of this new information will be added to Simon's ever-expanding archive and the next edition of the Groundsell family history.
I've got some new information for you regarding the Groundsell family house. So this is the house in its day, in the early 1900s. I think in its day it was quite a grand residence, by the looks of things. It was...
I think they had servants.
And this is the house today as it stands, so little has changed much.
We could have passed each other in the street umpteen times. We live 10 minutes away from each other. And because of Simon, we've got to know each other. On behalf of us all, I'd like to say a huge thank you, Simon, for bringing us all together and for organising all of this. So I'd like you all to raise your glasses, please, to Simon, and to the Groundsels. Cheers, everybody. Cheers.
Simon's mission to uncover his family history continues, but today marks the successful conclusion to the chapter that began his story 20 years ago.
I felt I've reconnected to my grandfather, and part of researching Family Tree is to keep the memory of your relatives alive and to realise this is your heritage. It's very important. It's like the end results of my research, so it's been a really fun day.
Lynn Lewis had been hoping for her own happy family reunion. Through an adoption agency, she thought she had found the older brother, David, who her mother had given up for adoption 60 years earlier. Now, all Lynn could do was wait and see if the man the agency believed was her brother would respond to her letter.
This letter appeared, and a few photographs from Lynn of her family and brothers and sisters. And it took me quite a while to read this letter because it was very emotional, and every time I read it now, it still brings tears to my eyes to think about, you know, what it meant to Lynn to write this, and for both of us anyway. So I treasure this. I keep this, I treasure this, and I always will do. Hello, David. It's hard for me to describe how it feels to actually be sitting down writing this letter to you, knowing that you are going to read it. You can't imagine how many times I have gone over what I would say if this time ever came. God, I can't live it.
I totally understand that you need to take things very slowly, as do us all. I have tried many times to look for you.
When I received the phone call with the wonderful news that you had been found, I went through a roller coaster of emotions, as I expect did you. I've spent more than 20 years not knowing whether this time would ever come, but hoping very much it would. I'm so looking forward to receiving a letter back from you in your own time. Until then,
may I wish yourself and your family well. Love, Lynn.
After reading that letter, I just wanted to get in touch with her as quick as possible, really, then. If we're going to meet, why drag it on any longer? We've waited all these years.
Lynn had found her long-lost brother, David. Now, the adoption agency could put the two in touch directly.
They said, we found your brother, and they said to me, we have a phone number for you. He wants you to get in touch with him. And I was, oh my goodness, no, it can't be happening. I was so excited. I was bursting. So I went upstairs into my bedroom, and a million things went through in my head what I thought I would say to him. And I practised it and practised it and practised it, and then I rang the number, and just before I put the last digit in, I put the phone down. And if I did that once, I must have done it 20 times before I finally dialed the number, and the phone rang, and my stomach was turning, and I was close to tears, and this voice answered the phone. I said, is that Dave? It's Lynn. And he said, hello, duck. Because he's a proper country bumpkin, and I just said, you wouldn't believe how long I've been trying to find you. And we just went on from there, and we talked, and we must have been on the phone for 2 hours.
It just seemed to click, and we just hit it off. And within seconds, we were laughing at each other's little jokes and things. And you'd have thought we'd have known each other all our lives, and yet it was the first time we'd ever spoken.
After his mother Maureen had to give him up, Dave grew up with his adopted parents on a farm in the Peak District.
I loved it. I loved being out of the country. We was out all day, every day when we were kids. I found out I was adopted at the age of around 7, when I think my mum thought we'd possibly understand what she was telling us and what it was, and And we've always known, and I've known as much as she knew. And I mean, I did get asked many years ago if we wanted to find out any more. But, you know, you were a small child then, and Mum and Dad was Mum and Dad, and you never thought no more about it as a small child. And it was left like that. And before I knew any more, I had a letter and a phone call, and Lynn had been looking for me, my sister.
As Dave learnt more about his birth family, there were several surprising revelations. Not least that his birth parents had stayed together after he was born, and that Dave grew up just a few miles away from where they lived in Buxton.
It was a shock to even find out that they had actually gone on to get married a few years later and have a family of their own, which then became my full-blown brothers and sisters. When I found bits about my birth father, then obviously I found his name was Alan and so on, and that was a shock to know that they'd got married and lived together happily after and raised a big family. And I'd only been literally teens of miles away from them all his lives and never known, but sadly I never got to meet Alan. He died before I got the chance to meet him.
Although it was too late to be reunited with Alan, Dave wasted no time in getting together with Lynn and the rest of his birth family, including his mother, Maureen.
It was about a week, something like that. About a week before we met, something like that. That week seemed to drag, and then it went quick, and then it dragged, and then emotions, and then sleepless nights thinking, and all sorts of things was going off. Things that you never even think of, you know. All sorts of things were flying through your mind.
It was the 1st of February, 2006, that at 7 p.m. we'd arranged to meet in the Red Lion pub. So I went along with my mum and my sister Paula, and we got there before they did. We got there early so we wouldn't be late, and we sat down with a drink and we watched through the window, and then all of a sudden this 4x4 pulls up in the car park, and out pops this strapping bloke round to the other side of the car, opens the door, and this little old lady gets out. So I said to my mum and Paula, this must be them.
Lynn and Paula had seen me coming, unbeknown to me, and as we walked through the door, they'd grabbed me. They bounced on top of me. So that was very emotional.
We just hugged and cried and looked at each other and didn't want to let each other go, and it was just amazing. And my mum and my sister got up and came over, and we all hugged and cried, and then his mum and my mum started talking.
And my mum walked round the back, and Maureen was sat there, very, very frightened, nervous like the rest of it. We all was, really. She walked straight up to her, put her arm around her, said, it's been a long time, but he's here now.
Maureen died a few years after they were reunited, but Dave still wants to learn more about his birth family, and especially his father, Alan. Today, Lynn has arranged for Dave to meet their aunt, Alan's sister, Beryl.
Hello. How have you been?
Oh, you all right, love?
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know what's going to happen today, really.
Oh, it's going to be well exciting day. I can't wait to see Auntie Beryl.
I know.
Today will be Dave's first real chance to find out more about Alan's side of the family.
My dad confided in Auntie Beryl when he was 15, so she's known about you and the circumstances why you were adopted right from the very beginning, I think.
Meeting Beryl's going to be probably a bit emotional, that'll be. Knowing that she was part of my dad, as you might say. And I'm hoping that she'll know different things that happened, because obviously they talked to each other, brother and sister. At that time, they were only kids, I suppose, themselves, weren't they? So she might be able to fill in a few gaps that I don't know. I mean, I know quite a bit about Mum's side, but I don't know a lot about Dad's side, so every little bit helps.
This is going to be a really good day. It's a really good day. Alan would have been overjoyed at his meeting. Oh, it would have been a joy for him, a real joy for him. We'll find out a bit more about each other and catch up about the family. Just get hold of him and hug him. Because we didn't have the opportunity to hug, really. You know, so it'd be lovely. Give him a kiss and a hug. Hello. Oh, come on, darling. Come on, David.
Hello, Andy Bell. Oh, dear.
Oh, we'll have a nice little chat now, won't we?
Oh, yeah, I hope so.
Oh,
wow.
Sit down.
How special this is going to be?
How special is it? Very special day for me. That's all for you.
Now, don't you look like me mum and our
Yes, yeah. It's more like your mum than our Alan.
Yeah.
Dave's keen to find out exactly what happened to his mum and dad after he was born from someone who was there at the time.
So, can you remember what actually happened after?
No, really. No, it was more or less taboo, you know.
Did Dad get into trouble? Can you at
Yes,
the time?
he did.
Because they actually met again when they probably shouldn't have done, and
Well,
as we know, we got married.
I don't think they ever stopped.
So, did Dad get told he had to keep away from her, or was there
Yes.
things?
In fact, there was a really big do.
Right.
You know, he got really
into trouble.
Yeah.
Did. Yeah.
Mum said that Dad actually got to see Dave before she gave him away.
Oh, I didn't know.
Well,
yeah,
I didn't.
She snuck out. She was allowed to take him on short walks. And how they managed to keep in touch with each other through the pregnancy when she was there, I don't know, but they must have done, because Mum said Dad actually got to see him just the once. They met up when they shouldn't have done, and she took him for a walk in the pram just before he was given up for adoption.
See, Mum told me that when they wasn't supposed to be seeing each other and meeting at all,
They were on the
they
side.
would go to the pictures, and Mum would sit in one row, and Dad would sit in another row, and they'd hold hands in the dark over the top.
I didn't know that. She never told me
That's
that.
just the little crafty meets us they had, and I just wondered if Auntie Beryl knew about things like this, you see.
I know they did meet up because, I mean, they weren't kept apart. No
matter how much they tried, it wasn't working.
No matter how much the family
that's
tried,
good. That's
it was, no, they did meet up.
Was everybody happy then when they got married?
Yeah, well,
It did sort of give up by that time.
Yeah, families had got over it.
It has to be. you know.
Yeah.
They were a unit. There was no other word for it. They were meant for one another, you know. They did everything they could to be together. It was the one true love. Like Heathcliff and all over again.
Let's have a look at the photographs then, Auntie Beryl, that you've brought. Like you stack.
This is your dad. That was taken at real.
I remember that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait till you see what I've got of my lads. We all look the same. And me when I was
These,
small, believe it or not.
There's your mum and dad at the wedding.
put that on mine.
Yeah.
You can have that because I've
Can
got
I?
a couple of them, yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah.
Look at Dad's hairstyle there. The Teddy Boy
Hey,
style.
I've got that cut as well. I have as a baby.
Have you?
This is me with one of them hairdos. Let's look at your photographs, Dave. Oh my goodness. Look at that. Wow. Looks so much like we did when we were babies. Oh, if only Mum and Dad had seen these.
My mum seems to think that was me on my way home to the farm.
When you
the first
were,
day,
yeah.
yes. And the clothes I'm wearing there, believe it or not, are in the day that we met for the very, very first time, we all sat there talking away and getting on really well. And my mum went down into her back and come out with this. And I'd never seen it. And she said to Maureen, "You recognise these?"
Oh my God.
And Maureen said, "Yes," she said, "because I embroidered them." And she couldn't believe my mum had still got them. And that's what I came. That's what I came home in the first day.
That's what you came home in.
Oh my God.
Mum said, "How is it you've still got it?" She said, "Because I just wondered and thought maybe one day I could show you back again."
Wow. It really is amazing. That is beautiful. I can't believe she kept it. I can't believe after 30-odd years or whatever it is that we'd be sat round a table sharing memories and photographs, the three of us together. It really does mean the
It
world
does
to
to me as well because you are part of Ireland, you see.
Absolutely. So you got a little bit of him back again for a
I
while
have.
now, haven't you?
Dave hasn't just been reunited with a sister and an aunt.
So a group hug.
He's now part of a large, extended family that until a few years ago, he didn't know existed.
Who's all these presents for? Wow!
There you go.
Dave seems a lovely man. Very pleased to have met him and to think he's part of my family, so that's rather nice.
It's been a very good weekend. I didn't expect half of what was going to happen, and it's happened and it's been good. And obviously I've met more family, so that's it's been a good ending to the story and a new beginning.
What a day. It's been absolutely fantastic. Can't believe that it's took all these years. But yeah, amazing. Absolutely amazing. I've loved every minute of it.